Those of you in my audience who are political junkies are probably already familiar with who Pramila Jayapal is, but for those of you who aren't, Pramila Jayapal is the chair of the Progressive Caucus in the House, which is the largest caucus in the entire Congress. I believe there's like 95 members of the Progressive Caucus, and we could get into how progressive they are at another time. But she's the chair of the largest caucus in the House, the Progressive Caucus. She's a Justice Democrat, part of the organization that, got AOC, that recruited and ran AOC, Ilhan Omar, Rashid Tlaib, all their Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, and ran their campaigns and got them elected. She's also a Justice Democrat. And she is the sponsor, the original author of the Medicare for All, the single-payer bill that's in the House of Representatives. So you would think that someone with all those qualifications, somebody in the position of power that she's in, you would think that in a public health emergency, she'd be the one leading the charge to get single-payer passed as a solution to the pandemic and the economic crisis. You would think that she would be having knockdown, drag-out fights with Democratic leadership, who, by the way, control the House, the Senate, and the White House. You would think that she'd be going to war with her party so that we can get this incredibly consequential and life-saving policy, single-payer, passed immediately to deal with the current emergency that we're in. That isn't the case at all. In fact, I can think of about 5 moments, 5 incredibly consequential moments since this pandemic started, since this unprecedented emergency and economic crisis started, where Pramila Jayapal and the progressives in general, they had leverage and they had the opportunity to make a public case to fight the Democrats to advance Medicare for All. And this is an important key part to the point that I'm making in this video, as a solution to deal with the pandemic. Because the pandemic is, yes, the incompetence of our government to contain the virus is part of the problem, but also our completely ineffectual for-profit private health insurance system is leading to an insane amount of people dying and going bankrupt because of this pandemic. So Medicare for All shouldn't be something viewed as, a solution 10 years from now, 15 years from now. It's the solution to the unprecedented public health emergency and economic crisis we're in today. And these progressives, I can think about 5 moments, like I said, where they had the opportunity to fight for it. Who says they could have, I don't know if they could have won. I'm not guaranteeing that they could have passed Medicare for All on any one of these battles, but they had these moments and they chose not to fight for Medicare for All in any of them. In any of them. The first one, when Bernie Sanders dropped out of the race, and then he and his campaign and Biden's campaign did those little bullshit kabuki theater task forces, and they had different policy issues that they were, I don't know, coming together on and trying to propose solutions to. And one of those policy task forces was on health care. Again, while we were in the middle of a pandemic, the lockdowns were already in effect when these task forces were created, to give you a sense of the gravity of the situation in the country at the time. So they had these task forces. You would think that somebody who's a staunch, fierce advocate, supporter of Medicare for All, who authored the bill in the House, you would think that if she is supposed to be one of the lead representatives for Bernie's campaign in these task forces, you would think that she'd be proposing Medicare for All, right? But she wasn't. By her own admissions, she didn't even bring up Medicare for All because she thought, hey, Biden's not going to do it, so why am I going to bring it up? Does that look like somebody who's fighting for Medicare for All? No, it didn't. So she was proposing lowering the Medicare eligibility age and including children in it. And those were her proposals to the Biden campaign. And of course, they didn't take any of those proposals. But like I said, it was an opportunity because Biden already stuck his neck out there and say, hey, we're coming together, unity and all this stuff, and we're listening to Bernie's campaign. All right, so make the public case that we need Medicare for all and in those task forces. And the second Biden says no, you rake his ass over the coals and call him corrupt and all that stuff, which you should have been doing throughout the campaign. But if you were fighting for Medicare for all, if you thought it was urgent, life-saving policy to deal with this pandemic, why not use that opportunity of the task force to fight for? But that's out of all of the examples, that is the most minor that I could think of. Then you had the CARES Act, the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history. Giant corporate bailout, corporate heist, let the rich and corporations run out the back door with all the money gratuitously, because I guess they're already the richest people in the country. But in the middle of an emergency, Congress used that as cover to help them multiply their already obscene wealth. And it was urgent for Congress to pass the CARES Act, and not for the reasons that people think. They had urgency in passing the CARES Act, which is why they did it within like 2 weeks, because the giant corporate bailouts and the corporate handouts that were in the bill. Now, I would have said that progressives should have just made a stand and said that we need to bail out the people before we do anything for corporations. I would have supported that. But if they already agreed to this mindset that we're going to pass the shitty corporate bill, again, why weren't the advocates for Medicare for all demanding something real in that bill to help the American people? Because that $1,200 check didn't really help the American people. That's not that the means tested $1,200 check, one-time $1,200 check, that didn't really improve people's lives. The unemployment insurance, which again, means tested, millions didn't qualify for, took weeks, months for some people to even get it if they did qualify for, that didn't really solve the problems that the American people were facing. If they wanted to get a real policy win, if they wanted to get real policy concessions to help the American people and make sure that is demand a part of any legislation that passed specifically regarding the CARES Act, why didn't they do that? Instead, Pramila Jayapal let Nancy Pelosi, let Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, and Donald Trump write this obscene corporate bailout, and then all the progressives, which she's the chair of the Progressive Caucus, they all went along with it, put up really no opposition, and Bernie Sanders voted yes on it in the Senate. So again, you had this moment of leverage. You could have held up the bill and said, we're not passing anything unless it has Medicare for all. If you were if you had any convictions and you were hell-bent on passing Medicare for all, that's what you would have done. Similarly, the same thing happened when the Democrats passed the HEROES Act through Congress. Now, this didn't make it through the Senate and the House like the CARES Act did, but it still passed the House. So, and it was supposed to be legislation to address the pandemic and economic crisis. So if Pramila Jayapal, again, if she was committed to passing Medicare for all and taking every opportunity to fight for it, to advance the cause of Medicare for all, why didn't she make that a demand as part of the HEROES Act? She did it. In fact, she came out again publicly and admitted, somebody asked her, so what are the red lines for the Progressive Caucus? What do you need to have in this bill in order for you to vote for it or to vote against it? And she said, we have no red lines. We just need to get help to the American people. So she's saying, whatever Nancy Pelosi wants to do, whatever this corporatist neoliberal Speaker of the House wants to do, then we'll just do it. And we won't even provide any pushback. And in that bill was nothing but, in regards to healthcare, all that was in there was obscene bailouts and to Cobra subsidies, handouts to Cobra, and handouts to other private health insurance companies to I don't even know what, because they weren't using that to cover the cost of their customers, because they jacked up the prices of health insurance at the same time. So that was all that Nancy Pelosi put in the HEROES Act in regards to healthcare. And again, if you were an actual fighter for Medicare for all, you would have said, hell no, my red line is that if we need to do something to actually address the rotten healthcare system in the country, and that means single payer in the middle of this pandemic, and we should put that in the HEROES Act. They had the opportunity, they didn't do it. And then, of course, most notably, the force of vote moment, where Pramila Jayapal, AOC, Ro Khanna, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Marie Newman, they all undeniably, irrefutably had the numbers to demand Medicare for All be voted on in the floor of the House, or else they wouldn't vote for the Speaker of the House. And if they made that demand, and if they stuck by that demand, it would have been impossible for the Democrats to make Nancy Pelosi or anybody else Speaker of the House, because the majority in the House is so slim that all it would take was about 6 or 7 Democrats to refuse to vote for Nancy Pelosi or any Democrat. And then by the rules of Congress, you need a majority of people who voted in the Speaker's race in order for you to win. And they, on their own, had the numbers to make sure that nobody could have been Speaker of the House, because they weren't going to get Republicans to vote for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House. So this was exclusively an exercise that was happening in the Democratic Party. And by doing this, by the way, they wouldn't have made Kevin McCarthy Speaker of the House, because that's not how the numbers work and that's not how the rules were set. So if they did that, up until now, we could have just still had no Speaker of the House. If the demand wasn't met, the demand for a floor vote on Medicare for All wasn't met, then it could have been a week later, a month later, 2 months later. They still wouldn't have had the votes to make somebody the Speaker of the House. And we would have been sitting here, and the country would have had to ask why, in the middle of an emergency, there is no Speaker of the House because the Democrats refused to bring up a Medicare for All for a floor vote. So that was an incredible and immense opportunity to advance Medicare for All, at least in the House, and let the debate happen in the House. Let there be a knockdown, drag out public fight where the corrupt politicians in the Democratic Party who are serving their corporate donors in the for-profit health insurance industry and Big Pharma, let them come out and make the case publicly why they're going to vote against providing health care to the American public in the middle of a public health emergency. While, by the way, they all have government health care. All the members of Congress have government health care on the taxpayer's dime. Let them come out and make the case that we're so corrupt that we're going to deny you health care because that's in the best interest of our corporate donors. Let them make that case. Let that spark a movement in this country. Massive protest and public pressure and create an entire media spectacle forcing politicians to do their job and pass Medicare for All in the middle of a pandemic. They had that opportunity and they folded, and they didn't even take a chance to fight for it. Like I said at the beginning of the video, who knows what would have happened? Who knows? Nobody's saying that they would have definitely won on Medicare for All. They would have definitely passed it through the House or through the Senate. Nobody's saying that it definitely would have happened if they had taken any of those opportunities to fight for Medicare for All. But there is no way you can justify them passing up every single one of those opportunities for Medicare for All. And there's no way you're going to tell me that not one of them were viable and valuable opportunities to fight for Medicare for All. You can't tell me that every single one of them, it was a bad idea to take that approach, to take that hostile approach to Democratic leadership in order to get Medicare for All. You can't tell me in every single one of those scenarios it would have been a bad idea. For all those people who are still anti-forced vote and they said, oh, it's bad strategy and all that stuff. You can't tell me every single one of those best opportunities to fight for Medicare for All was bad strategy. At some point, you have to acknowledge that they're passing up very reasonable and consequential moments to fight for Medicare for All in order to not rock the boat in the Democratic Party. And that is a problem. If the worst public health emergency of our lifetime, 500,000 people dead at least, if 60 million people losing their job and having, and the few and the millions of them who had health insurance losing their health insurance too, if 40 million people being evicted, if the unprecedented economic crisis, 60% of small businesses closing because of COVID closed permanently, if all these things don't make you take an openly hostile and adversarial approach to Democratic leadership, who, again, control the House, Senate, and the White House, then there's never, ever going to come a time when you openly criticize and are in open warfare with Democratic leadership. It's just never going to come. So this is why I've been hell-bent on making this criticism of these elected progressives. We know Republicans bad. We know corporate Democrats are bad. These people, these politicians, are claiming to be the leaders of the left movement in this country. And they are objectively steering us in the wrong direction, taking us down a path that we know will never get the policies that we need. So if they're doing that, and you're someone who's part of the movement, are you going to just blindly go along with this completely shit show strategy that we know isn't going to produce any results, and it hasn't yet? Are you going to just go be a good boy, be a good little girl, and go along with the strategy and hope, fingers crossed, that one day they'll see the light and they'll see that, oh, maybe talking nicely and asking corrupt politicians nicely to support the policies that the American people need, maybe that's not actually going to get us anything? Like, are you supposed to just sit there and cross your fingers and hope that they get the memo one day? Or are you going to draw a line in the sand and say, what you guys are doing does not work, I do not support that approach, and I want nothing to do with you. I want nothing to do with all your incremental approaches and your half measures and your 10-year, 15-year, 20-year plan to get Medicare for all, because I don't agree with you. And I'm going to remove myself from this, and I'm going to see you, I'll put you in the same category as everybody else as every other politician who isn't doing their job and actively doing everything in their power to fight for Medicare for all right now. And that's where I'm at right now. That's why it's important for me to criticize these elected progressives. Marianne Williamson did an interview with Pramila Jayapal over a month ago, and it was right after the speaker's race when all the Justice Democrats voted for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House and got absolutely nothing in return. Pramila Jayapal sat down with Marianne Williamson. The whole interview was fucking terrible. But specifically around the moment, like the force of vote moment, and when Marianne Williamson was asking her about how she plans on advancing Medicare for all, Pramila Jayapal's answers were fucking horrible. She was basically saying, the gist of it is, she isn't fighting for Medicare for all as a solution to the pandemic. No, she isn't. She's saying that, oh, maybe we should lower the eligibility age to 50. Maybe we should cover some kids. Maybe we should expand home health care and extend it for chronic health conditions and elderly people. Okay. And she's saying, oh, we can have hearings on all those things in the first 6 months. Okay, so you want to have hearings on things that are literally just tweaks to Obamacare. That doesn't sound like you want Medicare for all as right now, immediately, to address the pandemic. That sounds like you want tweaks to Obamacare. So this is an irreconcilable difference here. If, again, the left movement in this country wants Medicare for all right now. There is no better time to get it than right now. And all of the ingredients for a successful, sustained public pressure campaign to force politicians to get back to support Medicare for all right now, to pass it through the House and through the Senate and sign it, all of the ingredients are there for it, because the distractions that are normally there, like people working 40, 50 hours a week just to keep the lights on. Okay, well, 60 million people lost their job, and they're angry and they're fed up and pissed off at the government who left them for dead. Those are 60 million people you can use, that you can weaponize as protesters to put pressure on the politicians to do their jobs, because now they don't have, they're not working 40, 50 hours a week, and they aren't just waking up, going to work, going to sleep, and that's all that occupies their time. There's a giant gap in that time now, and you have, 60 million people who you can get out into the streets. And then with the unique situation of a pandemic and an unprecedented economic crisis, now it's even easier to get people to understand how existential this all is, how life or death this all is, not just for some random person they never met, but for them. So it's a lot easier at this moment to get people animated about this issue and to get them in the streets and to get them to pressure politicians. And that was what I thought the approach of the left was. So if you're not going to take this moment that was tailor-made for you to pass Medicare for all or to fight for Medicare for all, if you're not going to use any, and she has absolutely no strategy for public pressure, all it is committee hearings and things like that, lowering eligibility age. So you're abandoning any prospect of public pressure to force Nancy Pelosi's hand on Medicare for all. And you just resign to little technocratic approaches and little tweaks here and improving the system here, but no real fundamental change that actually addresses the root of the problem. So you can't say you support Medicare for all. You can't say you're part of this grassroots movement to pressure politicians, because you're not doing either one of those in the moment where you have the best chance of success. So I have that clip from Marianne Williamson's interview and with Pramila Jayapal. It's horrific. I'm gonna try to speed it up a little bit. You guys let me know if it's a little too fast for you in the comment section. And it'll be about maybe 4 minutes if I speed it up. But first, you guys already know the deal. If you're able to contribute to the show, I have links to Patreon and the About page of the YouTube channel. You can sign up to do different monthly subscription levels, $2 a month, $5 a month, $10 a month. And I don't have Patreon exclusive content because I really believe that it's best for everybody to have access to the content that I make on this show, regardless if you can pay or not. But so that's just if you want to help support the show. If you feel more comfortable doing a one-time contribution, I've linked to PayPal in the About page of the YouTube channel too. And again, as always, incredibly grateful for all the people who have contributed financially, and also just as grateful for the people who contribute through sharing the videos and keep showing up to watch the videos, commenting in the comment section. And yes, I do read all the comments. I'm incredibly grateful for my YouTube audience and how supportive you guys have been since I started this channel. Now I'm going to play this clip and then I'll come back and break it down.
That's just the reality. You do display generous ferocity. It's why so many of us absolutely adore you. However, I've counseled people for over 30 years, 35 years. And when people sit in front of me and they have problems, I always want them to remember what they've done right. And I always want them to think in terms of what they've done right and can do right. But I also submit to them that in order to heal their lives and to change their lives, they're going to have to look in the mirror. And the Democratic Party, I understand what you're saying. Well, we have to be positive. We have to see what we've done right. We have to build on what we've done right. But I believe we also have to look in the mirror. And everything that you've said, even though, you said to me, I'm an infrastructure person, and I understand that and I can appreciate it. But if I'm some college kid out in the Midwest, they don't necessarily understand the nuance. They just understand that Medicare for all is not being put on the table, and they don't care why at this point. But they don't.
That last time we got 3 hearings in the House of Representatives, official hearings in the committees of record for the first time in the history of the United States Congress. That didn't happen by just people saying, "Oh, we should do it." It happened by people mobilizing, putting pressure on Congress, fighting and negotiating within Congress on the rules package. The reason we got those hearings is because we said we weren't going to have the votes on the rules package, and so we were able to get the hearings committed to, and we got those hearings. We got over 50% of the Democratic caucus supporting Medicare for all. Did you know, Marianne, that before I introduced HR 1374, there was no Medicare for all bill? There was a resolution. It was about 18 pages long. It was the one that John Conyers had put forward for 20 years. But there was no detailed bill of how we were going to get it done.
Tell me the plan.
We got into the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Force through the Unity Task Force, Healthcare Task Force, which I co-chaired. We were able to get significant pieces of Medicare for all into the Biden platform. We didn't get Medicare for all. We knew we weren't going to. Our candidate lost. All of our candidates that supported Medicare for all lost. So Joe Biden won. So we knew he had put a stake in the sand around the Affordable Care Act. What were we able to get in there? We got a commitment that healthcare would be untethered from employment. That was huge. We got a commitment that any public option would be administered by Medicare and not by a private insurance company. You don't know how big that is and how hard we're going to have to fight for that, because they are already chomping at the bit to get that public option and administer it the way that Medicare Advantage plans, for example, are administered. We got a commitment that we finally tackle long-term care. That was put into my bill for the first time, the giant elephant in the room. We got a commitment that we would eliminate the 800,000 people that are in the long-term care waiting list and create 600,000 new long-term care jobs, mostly, by the way, women and women of color jobs. We got a commitment for the most aggressive pharmaceutical pricing that we have ever had, better than what we passed in the House of Representatives, that any pharmaceutical drug would be negotiated across all payers, and that no American would pay more for their pharmaceutical drugs than they pay in any other country. So we got we got a no deductible plan. I mean, I could go on. I have like 3 pages of what we were able to get. Now the question is, can we get Biden to deliver on those things? We put out in our 6-month agenda that we think there are other key ways to expand Medicare right now that would put us on the path to Medicare for all. What are those? That is dropping the Medicare age to 50. Biden committed to 60. I think we need to go to 50. We added covering all kids up to 25. And so if we can get those pieces in, that will be a significant step forward. But in addition, we have gotten a commitment already to do a hearing in the Small Business Administration Committee on the Medicare for All bill. We just got a CBO, Congressional Budget Office, assessment of a single payer system that tells us what we all know, but it comes from the CBO, which is significant, that Medicare for All would cost significantly less than any other system or single payer system. They didn't say Medicare for All. And so that positions us now to hold a big hearing on that piece to show all the myths that are out there. This is how we have to move it along. Now, the thing that people have to understand is wherever you are, you need to be in those districts where we have Democrats and Republicans who are not co-sponsors of the bill to get people onto the bill. I do not want to have a vote on a bill that is going to fail. So I need to get more co-sponsors on the bill so that I am sure that we can win the vote, because it will set us back years if we have a vote that fails on Medicare for All. That will be the end of the movement, where people will say, see, we had a vote and we couldn't get the support for it. So I think that is a terrible strategy. That is not the strategy I want to pursue, because I want to win. I want to win. I want to get healthcare for everyone. Single payer, guaranteed, universal, no private insurance premiums, no deductibles, comprehensive care for everyone, not tied to employment. And I have been working with an incredible movement of people, grassroots, labor unions. For the first time, Marianne, last year, we got something like 23 labor unions signed on. We don't have all of them. That has been a part of our problem, is some of the unions that have their own healthcare plans and have put a lot of money into them. And we haven't quite figured out how to deal with that issue and how to make sure that workers don't lose the money that was taken from their paychecks and put into those systems. So these are the pieces of work that have to happen. If somebody wants to call for us to force a vote on Medicare for All, I am happy to tell you why I think that's a bad idea. It will end our movement. And I refuse.
So she sounds like she is pushing incrementalism. She's bragging about incrementalism. And when Marianne Williamson, I didn't show the question before, but she was kind of pressuring them on the like, there aren't really wins here. Pressuring her on the fact that there aren't really wins here. And then she's like bragging about, oh, you didn't see that we had 3 hearings. That's never happened before in history. We had 3 Medicare for All hearings in the last Congress. Like, what the fuck is that? Well, how does that help people who can't afford the insulin? What, like, oh, we had 3 Medicare for All hearings. So, like, the thing with the hearings is they are absolutely fucking useless except for the public spectacle, that the opportunity for a public spectacle. Because these hearings are a sham. It's not like these are all good faith, honest actors here, and all the members of in Congress who are sitting in these committee hearings, they're just literally looking for objective facts, and they're going to come away with objectively what the best solution is to deal with the healthcare system in the United States. That's not what's going on in these hearings. They're all a sham. They already know it's not getting out of committee. They already know they have the votes to kill it from getting out of committee. So it's like, what are you bragging about here? Because like I said, the only value is the public spectacle. If you have those hearings, and in those hearings, you're ripping the corruption of the Democratic Party, the corruption of the members of that very same committee who take hundreds of thousands of dollars from the for-profit private health insurance industry, who are the only ones who benefit from the status quo. They're taking money from them, and then they're going to turn around and not let this vote, or vote it down in committee, and refuse to let single payer come to a floor vote on Medicare come to a floor vote on the House floor. That's the only spectacle, the only value there. And to maybe talk about how this system isn't working for regular people. The only value there is a spectacle. And she didn't make any spectacle out of it. All it was like pretending that these were honest actors here, and we just were asking the right questions. And if we let all these Democrats in the panel know that single payer, it works better, covers everybody, costs less, and it eliminates the 60,000 deaths that happen every year because people can't afford private health insurance in this country. Like, you aren't convincing any of these corrupt corporate Democrats in these hearings. So for her to be bragging about, oh, we had 3 hearings, and oh, what do you know? Absolutely nothing came out of it. They didn't advance it to the floor for a vote, even though we, in that same session of Congress, the same 2-year session of Congress, a pandemic and a public health emergency happened, and they still wouldn't advance it out of the committee to bring it for a floor vote. So what use are those hearings? It's just fucking theater. And then she goes on to brag about the shitty task force that she was a part of, this Bernie Biden task force that amounted to absolutely nothing. It was, again, minor tweaks to the for-profit health insurance system that we have in this country. And she's bragging about it, and she's talking about all these commitments that she got from Biden, which, again, are they better than the shit that we have now? Okay, but it's literally incrementalism. It's literally neoliberal half measures, and it's still buying into the neoliberal framework of there still has to be for-profit health insurance companies in the mix, though. We all agree on that, right? So, like, it doesn't get to the root of the problem. She's bragging about, she has all these commitments from Biden to lower the eligibility. He says he's lowering the eligibility age to 60. Wow, whoop-de-fucking-do. Oh, there's these commitments from Biden to have a public health. He's going to set up a public option run by the government as opposed to a public option run by corporations. And again, I don't even know how that works. That sounds a lot like just another version of corporate health insurance. But that's a conversation for another day. And she's talking about all these assurances that she's got from Biden. Biden is a fucking liar. Most notable, I won't even go into his historic record of telling outright brazen and just absurd on their face lies that are just ridiculous. Let's just go to the most recent and most brazen lie, which is vote for these Democrats to take control of the Senate in Georgia, and we'll get you $2,000 checks immediately. What happened to that? Now, oh, did we say $2,000? We meant $1,400, because if you add the $600 that you maybe got a month ago or 2 months ago, then it equals $2,000. And then it went from immediately to, oh, let's do an impeachment hearing. Let's open a 9/11 style commission on the riots at the Capitol. Let's talk about a million other things. Let's do everything else other than pass those $2,000 checks, which he said we're going to go out the door immediately if the Democrats control the Senate. So Biden is just a fucking liar. And for you to brag to the left that you got assurances from Biden that not that assurances that he was going to pass Medicare for all, assurances that he might do some shitty neoliberal reforms to Obamacare. What the fuck are you talking about? That doesn't make anybody feel better. The people who have no health insurance, who can't afford to take their kids to the doctor, who can't afford to go to the doctor themselves, who can't afford their life-saving prescription pills, who can't afford the medical treatment for treatable diseases but are life-threatening, they can't afford them. You having hearings doesn't do anything. And then she says that, oh, we already have assurances from House Democratic leadership that we'll have committee hearings on these things within the next 6 months. Okay, by the way, this interview was a month ago. Where absolutely no movement on any of those hearings as of yet. And also, by the way, like I keep mentioning, those are hearings on neoliberal reforms, incrementalism. And you keep calling them steps to Medicare for all. But, so, like, okay, say everything works out the way you're saying it's going to work out, and in 6 months we get shitty hearings on lowering the eligibility age from 65 to 50 and covering all kids from up to the age of 25. And by the way, what an arbitrary line to draw. that, oh, we'll cover people who are 50 and older and anybody younger than 25. But anybody else in the middle, you can figure it out by yourself. What a fucking ridiculous neoliberal mindset type of shit to be bragging about and to even propose as an actual solution to this corrupt health insurance system that we have in this country. But aside from that, even if you get everything you want, even if you get everything you're saying right here, 6 months later, we would have just had hearings. Nothing about a floor vote on any of those policies. We would have just had hearings. And this is what I'm getting at. She's not fighting for Medicare for all to address the pandemic. She's not using this pandemic. She's not proposing Medicare for all as an immediate solution. She's not proposing single payer as an immediate solution to the economic crisis and the public health emergency. She's saying if we do incrementalism, if we take neoliberal half measures, then, we're taking steps toward Medicare for all, so I'm just going to say I'm fighting for Medicare for all. It doesn't work like that. What you're fighting for is neoliberalism and incremental reform to the corrupt for-profit health insurance system that we have. And you're saying that it's going to lead to single payer. But here's the thing. That's exactly what they said when they passed Obamacare over 10 years ago now. Oh, the left needs to keep their britches on, or whatever the saying is. They need to calm down. They need to ease up. We passed this historic reform, and this is what neoliberals love to do. They love to go off the fact that the system was so shitty and the problems were so unaddressed that any little change they can say is historic, which is Pramila Jayapal did in this interview too. But they said, oh, we passed this historic healthcare reform in Obamacare, and that's putting us on the path to get single payer. Like I said, it's 10 years later. The economic situation in this country has gotten unbelievably worse, and we're in a public health emergency, and the Democratic Party is still fighting tooth and nail against Medicare for all. So this whole, we're taking steps to it, and we're building to, I don't believe that shit at all. And at the end there, she tries to shit on the forced vote movement. And she tried to strawman it, and frame it in such a disingenuous way. And like, I don't want to lose on Medicare for all. I want to win. And you guys are proposing a floor vote that might not win, it might lose. And I'm not in favor of that because that is going to hurt the movement. What sleazy bullshit, status quo defending bullshit. Oh my God. So the whole premise of this, and it's frustrating to me. This idea, like, it's people are acting like there's no historic precedent for passing major left policies in this country. What happened with the Civil Rights Act? It wasn't like Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, and the Black Panthers and all the civil rights activists. They didn't come up with the strategy. You know what? I think the best way to end segregation, the best way to secure civil rights for minorities in this country, I think the best way to do that is if we elect some politicians. They go to Congress, we elect enough of them that they get the majority, and then they'll do some type of technocratic bullshit, and then we'll also have the White House, and then we'll introduce the Civil Rights Act. It'll pass the first time, and boom, there we go. We passed the Civil Rights Act in about 20, 30 years. Like, that's not their approach at all. It was strictly public pressure. Get the politicians to do their job, abide by the Constitution, and make sure that everybody has equal rights in this country, and do it immediately. And they weren't worried about, oh, if we introduce it, we can't have it introduced and fail, or else we'll set the movement back. That's not what their approach at all. It was, we're going to fight for a vote on this, and then once that vote comes, we're going to fight like hell to make sure every politician we can get is on the right side of this. That was their approach. Win or lose, pass or fail, that's how they viewed it. And because of that, it didn't pass the first time. But guess what? It passed almost immediately after. I think it was a year, maybe 2 years after it failed the first time. It passed and was signed. So this whole idea of, oh, We can only do baby steps. We can only do half measures. We can only do incremental reforms and hope that in 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, at least in Medicare for All, that's the only way we can get it. But if you guys want to take all these big stances, bold stances, and really go out on a limb, and what if you lose? You'll set the moment back and then we'll never get Medicare for All. So, hey, let's better be safe than sorry and not take any bold approaches, not make any big, bold moves and fight for Medicare for All. Let's just beg these corporate Democrats and beg them for crumbs, and we'll just take what we can get until maybe we get Medicare for All. Wow. That's literally an argument for incrementalism. These are so allegedly the leaders of the left movement, the populist movement in this country, the social democratic movement in this country. These are the people. And it's like, another thing that's frustrating to me is, and this was true throughout this entire clip and overall throughout the interview, they're acting as if politics has not been shifted and changed, like it hasn't been flipped on its head. They're acting as if these are just normal times, under normal circumstances. They're acting as if 60 million people didn't lose their job. They're acting as if a third of the country right now doesn't have health care in the middle of a public health emergency. And they're acting like these things cannot help them. They're acting like they cannot use these things. They're acting like they can't build on these things to further advance Medicare for All. It's like they don't even factor that into any of the calculations, any of the strategies that they're using. Her answer here sounds exactly the same as if 2020 didn't happen, as if we aren't in the middle of a pandemic, and as if we aren't in the middle of the worst economic crisis in history. She's acting as if, like her answers would be exactly the same. And I know that because this is exactly the type of shit she was saying back in 2017, 2018, 2019. So it's weird to me. And it's not just these elected progressives, it's also in new media, how it's like their view of politics has frozen and they're incapable of processing any new changes, any new information. The way that the dynamics in this country have completely shifted, and there's nothing that's a hard and fast rule anymore. Everything's up in the air, and it's all up to you to seize the moment, to seize this opportunity, to make the best of you that you can with it. It's like they're not even trying to. It's like, oh, we have this strategy of incrementalism and electoral politics, and we're just going to stick to it till the end of time. So Marianne Williamson asked her about the timeline, because this timeline is completely divorced from reality, and there is no urgency to get these policies for the people whose lives depend on it. So Marianne Williamson asked her, when exactly do you expect Medicare for All to pass? And I have the clip. I'll come back and break it down.
Okay, I appreciate you explaining that to me. I appreciate everything that you just said, and I needed to hear some of that. Let me ask you a question, though. With what you just described, what's your timeline?
Well, we're asking for these things in the first 6 months, right? So, but the Medicare, I mean, what we really want to bring to the floor are these pieces of expanding Medicare, and doing it within the context of the pandemic makes a lot of sense. The AFL, the AFL has been working very hard with some of our partners, our labor union partners. They just put out a statement saying that they're supportive of dropping the Medicare age to 50, where we want to cover kids. If we can get those bills through, and even if it's just contingent on the pandemic moment, that gives us the ability to continue the fight. The hearings, I think the Small Business Administration Committee's hearing, we're hoping to have in the spring, and we're hoping to get the energy and commerce piece going as well within the first year, within the first 6 months. We're already scheduled for a rollout. I believe it's the first week of February for the Medicare for All bill. That will be a big moment for the Medicare for All movement to come together. I've been working to continue to get co-sponsors on. I started a Medicare for All PAC. You might know we've been doing these education sessions to help candidates who run on Medicare for All to be able to fight back against the attacks that they get, millions of dollars of attacks that they get from Democrats, by the way, and Republicans. And also, continuing to work to expand the number of people who are just ready to fight for Medicare for All and win on Medicare for All wherever their district. So those are all the pieces that are going on. But this is all for the first 6 months. We've got a full plan laid out, and we've done it with our movement allies, with our progressive allies. Everybody is on, I shouldn't say everybody, because obviously I know there's some people who would like us to go a different path, but let me say the people who have been most involved in these discussions and in really thinking through the strategy of how we move something along. This is enormous progress for the Medicare for All movement, and it comes because of people around the country who have been continuing to do the hard work of getting their members of Congress on board, getting their city councils and county councils and state legislatures to pass resolutions or to move single payer bills. So
she answers the question, she gives her little shitty response to the timeline. So my thing is, okay, she has this timeline, we're going to introduce the first week of February. And this is, by the way, back in January, right after they voted for Nancy Pelosi to be Speaker of the House. I believe that interview was done January 7th. She said the first week of February, we're going to introduce Medicare for All bill again. Okay, you introduced it before. What happened when you did that? Absolutely nothing. So you're going to introduce it again. Then you said within 6 months, you're going to have these hearings about lowering the eligibility age and doing home health care or whatever the fuck else, and long-term health care. And that's going to eventually get us to Medicare for All again. Like, she didn't even give a date or estimation. She just says, this is what we're going to do right now, and that's what we're working on. And so my problem with this timeline is, one, just a month after this interview, the timeline's already way off, and it's already not working. Still haven't seen that bill introduced. And by the way, when they introduce a bill, it doesn't mean anything. They could introduce bills on any goddamn thing. Doesn't mean it's going anywhere. Because they introduced a bill on Medicare for All. Guess what? It didn't go anywhere. It didn't see the floor for a vote. And that's why the force a vote moment was so important. But they're going to introduce a bill with no plans to get it to the floor. And then they relying on corporate Democrats to give them the opportunity to have these hearings about lowering the eligibility age or whatever. And if they do have the hearings, it won't get out of committee. And so this gets to something that is annoying about her entire analysis. And it comes off as misleading and disingenuous. Because at no point in her analysis does she say that the main obstacle is going to be the corporate Democrats. The members of our own party, the leadership of our own party, they're going to be fighting tooth and nail to make sure that Medicare for All doesn't come to pass. Joe Biden said he'll veto it. But she doesn't factor that in to any of this. And it's just as if that obstacle doesn't exist. And she has no plan to address it when it inevitably rears its ugly head. So all of this it just sounds like bullshit. It sounds like she's just trying to appease the left, and she isn't trying to rock the boat, and she isn't trying to buck party leadership at the same time. You can't tell me you're fighting for Medicare for All and have absolutely nothing, no strategy, no plan for when Nancy Pelosi refuses to bring it up for a floor vote on the House. Because we know she's not going to do it, because she hasn't done it yet. So when we had when people who were pushing force to vote had the leverage to force a floor vote on Medicare for All, Pramila Jayapal says, that's a bad idea, we shouldn't do that. But we're going to instead just introduce a bill and pray by the good graces of Nancy Pelosi that she will be ever so kind and allow it to a floor vote. But she's not. And then what? And then what? What are you going to do to get it to the floor? Yeah, we haven't really thought about that, but we're just going to bring it to the floor and we're going to have some hearings. Pramila Jayapal she's not supporting Medicare for All as a solution to the pandemic. She's supporting incrementalism, and she's supporting reforms to the healthcare system. And you can say, hey, that's better than we have right now. Sure. But that's not Medicare for All. I'm going to need everybody to stop saying she supports Medicare for All. She put her name on the bill, just like many other people did, but she's not actually using the leverage, the opportunity that this moment presents. She's not using her power as chair of the Progressive Caucus, the largest caucus in the House, to whip votes and stop bills unless Medicare for All is being passed immediately. So she does not support it. Just like people are saying Joe Biden doesn't support $15 minimum wage because he folded so easily when Joe Manchin said he doesn't support it and he won't vote for it. That same principle applies to these elected progressives. They have the opportunity to fight for it, but they're not. So that means they really actually are fighting for incrementalism and neoliberalism.